Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for week 3 of BFSG's 4-part summer webinar series in 2023. Today on finding your retirement mindset. I'm so excited for this topic today, really addressing things you should think about as you get into retirement. Let me pass it over to our panelists, Mr. Paul Horn.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. Again, my name is Paul Horn. I'm the senior financial planner here with BFSG. Glad you guys can join us today. Looking forward to talking about everything around retirement that is not financial. Today's retirement mindset is all about being emotionally prepared for retirement, not so much on the financial piece. We're lucky to have with me today Pat Powers, who is one of our owners and one of our founders. Pat, can you introduce yourself a little bit better?
Yeah, they've got me on the panel today just because I'm old and closest to considering the retirement mindset. So it's a pleasure to be with you, everyone, and I'm happy to share my thoughts and reflections with you today.
All right, so why are we talking about retirement mindset? Well, a study was done by Greenwald and Associates a few years ago, and what they found talking with individuals nearing retirement is 3 out of 4 of them, or 74%, had done a great job to financially prepare for retirement. However, out of those same group of people they spoke to, only 1 in 3, or 35%, had put any sort of serious effort to emotionally be prepared for retirement. So everybody knows to be financially prepared, and there's lots of people out there that help with that, but very little focus is put on being emotionally prepared and making that transition much easier. So our agenda for today, we're going to break this down into 4 parts. First thing is just going to talk about some questions that you should consider when you're thinking about retirement, just to kind of help frame that thought process. Secondly, we're going to talk about managing expectations in retirement. And this is really important. It's like anything else in life. If you have unrealistic expectations, you're setting yourself up for failure, for frustration, for anxiety. So we want to talk about how to manage those expectations. We're going to then talk about how to develop a retirement mindset. And last, we'll focus on just some practical tips to help you guys be emotionally and physically prepared. So with that, let's kick it off with the first poll.
I like it. Thanks, group. So again, as you all know, a lot of these are interactive. This is actually our only interactive poll today. This is really for us to kind of get a gauge on who the audience is and what you're looking for. So let me launch that thing. I'll drop it up on the screen right now. I actually added, which Paul does not know, to the end of this, 2 additional options, because some of you might say, no idea. I have no idea why I want to retire. And others might say there might be some other reason that's not even on this page. I think these 2 put what are, I think for most people, the 5 most popular or common. Okay, with most people having responded, I'm going to close this poll out. I know there's a few more trickling in here, but let me close this thing out real quick and pull. And what I can tell you, I'll share results with the group so you can all see it as well. You see about 20% say just reaching a certain age, 37% say wanting to stop working, 23% feeling ready to retire, right? 46%, I just want to do other things, right? I just want to stop doing what I'm doing every day to day. 13% say I've reached a certain asset level, right? And now maybe it's time. And 7% out there say no idea. So hopefully that gives our panelists here some good feedback and kind of sets the stage for what we're going to talk about today. Let me stop sharing.
Yeah.
All right. So the same poll was asked to a group of individuals, and the results were pretty interesting. Looking at you guys here, for the group that was polled, reaching a certain age was the biggest answer. And for most people, it's just 65. Just that's when I want to retire is age 65. When I get there, I'm out. For you guys, it's nice to see that there's more thought process behind it. It's either wanting to stop working or wanting to do other things. That's actually a good thing to see. So for a second, I'd like you guys to close your eyes. Just think, okay? You win the lottery today. You are set for life. You don't have to work another day in your life. Tomorrow is your first day of retirement. What are you going to do that day? Just honestly take some time and just think about that for a second. What does retirement look like to you? I imagine a lot of you are thinking about travel. That's the number 1 answer I typically see working with clients. Finally having the time to go to Europe, go to Asia, Australia, wherever it is. spending time with family or loved ones, maybe volunteering, maybe it's hobbies, maybe it's sewing, maybe it's surfing, maybe it's golfing, maybe it's croquet. I don't know. Maybe it's something else. But whatever you're thinking of here is probably one of the things that you're most passionate about. So please keep that in mind as we continue our conversation. I think perhaps the most overlooked question when we talk about retirement planning is, what does retirement look like to your significant other, to your spouse, or to your partner? Does retirement look the same or different than yours? Do they share the same ideas or concerns that you do? And keep in mind, what is exciting for one can be a nightmare for another. Real life example, we have a husband and wife that recently retired. Husband, his idea is to golf and spend time with family. The wife's biggest thing that she wants to do is travel. Since she's retired, she's been to Europe 3 times, done other trips. And he travels with her more domestically, smaller trips or maybe a cruise. But on those bigger trips, he stays home and golfs and spends time with loved ones. She's out doing her thing, and that's okay. But whatever retirement looks like for both of you, you really should begin to have that discussion now. Pat, is there anything you want to add here?
Yeah, I think that's a very important concept, Paul. It took both of you to get here if you're married or in a relationship. And so it's your retirement, not my retirement. And I think that's a really healthy way to look at it. For couples, it's a project to be worked on together, kind of like remodeling a home. Work together to achieve the best possible outcome for both of you. And it really helps to collaborate and to cooperate in that process and to dream together. And I think it's important to really take a look at retirement. It's sometimes we just think of it in terms of stopping working, and it's really a fresh start, a second chance, if you will, just full of opportunities and discovery. And it's an opportunity to repurpose yourself. So better tackled if it's done together, for sure.
Just some other basic questions to help you kind of think about this is, do you have any questions about retiring, financial or otherwise? If you do, probably should be asking someone. What are your expectations for retirement? And where do those expectations come from? Why are they important to you? How do you feel about retirement? Are you excited, nervous, scared? Maybe a little bit of all three? What's driving those emotions? Last thing is, what do you need to have happen to feel confident about being able to retire? All right, so let's go ahead and move on. Let's talk about managing expectations. Again, like we said before, if you have unrealistic expectations, you're just setting yourself up for frustration. So we really want to make sure that we're thinking about retirement in the healthiest way possible. As we talked about earlier, the biggest response we saw in surveys, not from you guys, but from other individuals that have been surveyed, the biggest reason that people typically want to retire is they reach a certain age. That age is 65. That's what people plan to continue to work until, and that's when they plan to retire. However, life happens. We know whatever plan we have, life is going to probably throw us a curveball and it's not going to work out exactly as we imagined. And for most individuals, this is actually true. Well, we see that most people plan to retire at age 65. The actual median retirement age or average retirement age is 62. 3 years before they actually retire is when most people end up retiring. So if you're not planning for that, it can really catch you by surprise. Now, what's causing people to retire at age 62 instead of age 65? Well, the biggest driver for this is just health problems, right? Maybe you're in construction and you just can't continue to do the work. Maybe it's just too hard on you physically. My mom worked at Nordstrom's for over 30 years. She actually had to stop working and was forced into retirement because she had hip replacement and knee replacement. And just being on her feet all day was something she was no longer able to do. The number 2 reason we see is just companies downsizing or closing, positions being closed. We saw this a lot during COVID, right? In 2020, a lot of people got laid off or forced into retirement. And when they had the opportunity to go back, a lot of people just chose to stay retired. And it's not all bad news why people are retiring earlier. Just some people find out they can financially afford to retire earlier, so they choose to do so because they want to do other things, just like most of you. Pat, anything you want to add here with managing expectations?
I think it's important to be very intentional about retirement, to create a plan, to put it in writing, to review the plan, to periodically grade yourself on your plan, to check yourself and correct yourself. It's not going to happen without you being somewhat intentional about it. At least it's not going to happen the way you want it to be, or it's not going to be all that it could be. So I think it's a very important to be intentional about it, and that ties into managing the expectations when you retire. The other thing I'd say is that break up your retirement into maybe 3 stages, and Paul's going to talk about this a little bit more. But the first part of your retirement, the first years aren't going to look like the last years, and neither the first nor the last years are probably going to look like the middle years. And so you want to kind of take a look at your retirement probably in at least 3 different stages, and be aware of that and plan accordingly.
So how are most retirees spending their time? Well, what we're finding is for most retirees, they're sleeping 9 hours a day. Now, I got 2 smaller kids, so this sounds like a dream to me, but that's great. We're finding the next biggest activity is just relaxing and leisure. Most people spending about 6.25 hours on that. And the third biggest activity is watching TV, about 4.5 hours. So we know that we have 24 hours in a day. Okay. But if we add up just these 3 biggest activities of sleeping, relaxing, and watching TV, this is about 20 hours a day. That leaves 4 hours a day for everything else. Attending religious services, working out or doing exercise, volunteering, socializing, reading, following those passions or those hobbies. Less than 4 hours a day is what the average retiree is doing right now. Now, this is what most people think retirement looks like. Doesn't have to be. The key here is having a plan and being intentional. What retirement is not, is it's not sitting and watching TV all day. It's not sitting on your porch in a rocking chair waiting for the Grim Reaper. That's not retirement. We're going to talk more about what retirement actually is and what it should look like. And Pat, I think you have some thoughts here.
Yeah, I would plead with all of you to please don't think of retiring in the sense of ceasing or dramatically reducing activity. There's only one way to coast, and that's downhill. So don't be that person. Use it, and don't lose it. Very, very important. Address fears head on. Don't stick your head in the sand. Reach out for help if you need it. I think that's very, very important when you're going through this planning process as well. I found this slide to be very distressing, to be honest with you. I hope that there's not very many people on the call that want to spend 4.5 hour days watching TV, or just sitting around doing nothing. 6.25 hours, maybe sitting around doing nothing. The activities that are going to make a difference in your life, in your retirement. Number one is going to be exercise. And even that's got to be very intentional. You want to do the kind of exercise that's perhaps not going to help you run a marathon or something like that, but you want to do the kind of exercise that's going to help you to lift the luggage up into the overhead bin, in the airplane. That's going to allow you to walk around the cities in Europe. That's going to allow you to bend and to be flexible and to be active without having pain when you do so. And so it's important that you be very, very intentional about exercise. And I think exercise is more important than ever in your retirement years, because if you're not healthy in that regard, you're not going to be able to do a lot of the things that you want to do. The other things on here that I think are overlooked and are very, very important are socializing and communication. And socializing and communication has such a big part to play in your happiness, okay? And happiness is such an important factor in a successful retirement. It's also very, very stimulating as far as your brain is concerned, and your networks, your physical networks. And so socialization, that should be a whole lot higher. Volunteer activity should probably be a whole lot higher. The right kind of reading is very, very helpful. You want to learn a language or learn how to play a guitar or the piano, and you don't have to be good at it. You just have to do it. And that just keeps everything working the way it's supposed to, and will extend the quality of your life immeasurably. So those are the kinds of things, I'd like to see the computer activity, increase on here. And I would say be very, very careful about what you allow into your life from a stimulus point of view. There's a lot of things on TV that are really, really good to watch, and there's a whole lot more that are worthless. And so you want to be very, very careful about, what you allow into your life if you want to have a successful and happy and stimulative retirement.
Yeah, there's a lot of studies have been done on Alzheimer's and dementia, right? The two biggest diseases impacting retirees. And those that are able to avoid those typically tend to be more focused on things like reading. They tend to be more socially active, and they tend to be more active in sports and recreation. So these things are good for your health and improve the quality of life in retirement. They also stave off the biggest potential concerns health-wise in retirement. So let's talk about the emotional stages of retirement. All right. The first one in the upper left is a pre-retirement planning. I'm guessing most of you are probably here today if you're on this webinar. Some of you might be in the other stages, and that's totally fine. But for most people, this is just starting the process, thinking about retirement. Then you finally decide to pull the trigger. You set the date of your retirement, and it's goodbye to that old job and hello to freedom. After that, there tends to be this honeymoon phase. It's woohoo, I'm done. I finally have the time to do the things that I want to do. And for clients, I've kind of seen this interesting scenario where these 2 and 3, they don't necessarily work in this order for everyone. For some people, the honeymoon phase comes before the big day. I would say this is kind of like senioritis. If you don't know what senioritis is, it's for someone that's in high school, a senior. Imagine that spring semester in high school, we were all there, probably didn't do very well that last semester. You're not thinking about school anymore. Most people's GPAs drop a little bit that last semester because that buildup, that excitement for the big day, right? So they're just thinking about other things. So they're kind of in that honeymoon phase before the big day even comes. But either way, soon after retirement, most people go through a period of discouragement and grief. I thought there'd be more to this. As we showed you guys, people have a lot of retirees have trouble filling their day. Kind of forced to go to work and forced to be at work. So you're kind of told where and when to be. And all of a sudden you have freedom. And if you're not deliberate in how you're going to be that or intentional, then, it can be a little bit discouraging. And a lot of people too, their self-worth, their identity, especially for males, is so much tied up in what you do for a living, right? Just think about it when you meet a stranger for the first time. What are the 2 questions the most commonly asked? What's your name? What do you do? And so a lot of us, our pride or how we see ourselves is tied up in what we do for a living. And when you lose that piece in retirement, it takes a while to kind of retool and rediscover who you are. And that leads us to the next stage, is kind of developing your new purpose. And then from there, we kind of finally find acceptance. I've been working with retirees now for 17 years. And I would say on average, some people go through these stages as fast as 3 months, some as long as a year. The average is about 6 to 9 months that I've seen people that kind of go through all these stages. So just kind of have patience and some grace with yourself as you're kind of going through this. Pat, what are your thoughts about the emotional stages of retirement?
When Paul and I were going through these slides a few days ago, I asked him to add a word to this slide, and it's the last word in the yellow box, grief. And there's a certain grieving process that takes place here as well. When you leave your work career, something that you devoted the majority of your life to, you can feel some feelings of grief, almost like you lost a loved one. You can't put it on the same level as that, of course, but some of the feelings are kind of the same. There's a void there. It feels like something's missing. You may have gotten a lot of your self-worth or self-value from your job, from your career, and now that's behind you. What does that mean for you? It just leaves a bit of a void. So that's very, very normal. It's very, very normal. So just kind of work with it and go with it and work through it, and you will. But don't be surprised if it happens to you.
All right, Pat, can you talk about the physical stages of retirement? You kind of touched on this earlier.
Yeah, Paul and I were talking the other day about this, and there's kind of different stages to retirement. And here we're talking about the early retirement, the middle retirement, the late retirement. You could say, the early years, the middle years, the late years, and those three stages, they're not going to look the same. You're probably going to be a lot more active in the early part of your retirement than you are in the latter part of your retirement. And you can't necessarily divide these into equal thirds or anything like that, but I think they are three pretty distinct phases. So it's good to recognize that up front too and say, okay, what do I want my early retirement, my active years to look like? And okay, if I get to the point where I can't do some of those things or don't want to do some of those things, how do I want the middle part of it to look like? And once I'm in the later stages of my life, how do I want that to look like? Some of our clients are have long-term care programs and so on and so forth, and they've got that planned out pretty well. Others, their long-term care plan is, I want to die at home. I don't want to die in a board in care place or in a hospital or wherever. And that's fine. It's whatever works for you, but you have to be somewhat intentional about it, and you have to plan for the outcome that you want and not just, kind of let it happen to you if you want as satisfying a retirement as you can possibly have.
All right, so let's talk now a little bit what it takes to develop a retirement mindset. If we're going to develop the proper mindset, the first thing to understand is what are the biggest challenges that you face. So the four biggest practical challenges that we see with our clients, the first one is just that feeling of isolation, because social interaction declines when you're no longer working. With work, you have that built-in social network, you have that water cooler talk, you're probably going out to lunch with some coworkers periodically, maybe happy hour. And so you have this kind of built-in social network. And when you retire, you lose that. And this can be even more challenging if you have family or friends that are out of state. And so here you really need to be more intentional to, recognize this and be more intentional to be socially active in retirement. Second one I see is a lot of people experience a decline just in how they view themselves. Their self-worth, there's feelings of not being as important or as not feeling like they're needed. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Third thing I see is just feeling anxious about not having a paycheck in retirement, right? When you're working, you get that pay every 2 weeks, twice a month, whatever the case is. So with that regular paycheck, you're confident in paying your bills. You can have $50 million in the bank account and still feel anxious when you retire because you're not sure where the money is going to come from and if it's going to meet your needs throughout all of retirement. And then the fourth challenge that we see is just creating a new identity. Because we talked about this already, right? Most people's identity is tied into what they do for a living. And when you lose that, it's kind of going through that grieving process that Pat talked about already. And it's tough to find a new identity. And the four biggest emotional challenges we see is it takes some time to struggle as people struggle with switching off from work mode to relaxing mode or retirement mode. As I said, that this transition for most people takes about 6 to 9 months. A lot of people find it difficult to fill the extra hours with meaningful activity. We showed you how the average retiree is spending their day, either doing leisure activities or watching TV. That's 10 hours a day. So a lot of people have difficulty doing the things that are going to bring them the most happiness. Third is just adjusting your routine, maintaining independence with your spouse. So let me kind of explain this one a little bit more. Maybe one of the spouses is stay at home. Maybe both the spouses retire at the same time. But when you're working, you kind of have your own life outside of the house. And then you have the family life, right? And what happens is if both spouses or both partners are in the house together at the same time, that can actually create conflict, seeing each other too much. And so it's good to maintain some autonomy or maintain a life outside of the home still when you're retired. If you like to golf, golf. If you like to spend time with friends, spend time with friends aside from being with your partner. That's okay. That's healthy. I gave you guys the example where we have one spouse golfing and spending time with loved ones. The other one's out traveling. That's healthy. That's okay. They still love each other. They still have a great home life, but it's okay to pursue your passions in retirement. Your passions may not be the same as your spouse, and that's all right. The last one is some retirees feel guilty about receiving money or a pension that they've receiving. Maybe you're receiving that Social Security check, or maybe you've been paying into a pension for decades and now you're getting that check. I've had clients feel guilty about that. Don't. You've been paying into Social Security for decades, typically 30, 40 years. If you're lucky enough to have a pension, you've been paying into that for decades. If anything, you're probably not getting enough benefit given how much you paid into it. So you shouldn't feel guilty at all. That's money that you've been paying into for years. You're just getting back a portion of what you paid into that. Pat, anything you'd like to add here?
One of the things that we've talked a lot about, and I've mentioned it to so many clients over the years, and that is, not even talking about or thinking of it in terms of retirement, but think of repurposing yourself. And I think that's a really healthy attitude to have. The concept of repurposing incorporates a variety of different things, such as, talking to each other and friends about it. What do you want the rest of your life to look like? How can you make that happen? What's important to you? What do you want to be remembered for? Without the constraints of work, how can you contribute to the betterment of the world or your community or your family or your church or your friends or just to each other? And it reminds me of a quote from St. Augustine. And St. Augustine said that asking yourself this question, what do I wish to be remembered for? What do I wish to be remembered for? Is the beginning of adulthood. And I thought, wow, that's right on. That's right on. What at this stage in your life, what's really important to you? Is it your grandchildren, your children? Is it a charity? What is important to you? Is there something that you can do to move along that path that you want to go down? And the Buckminster Fuller, who's a prominent futurist and author, said, what is it on this planet that needs doing that I know something about and that probably won't happen unless I take responsibility for it? And, each and every one of us, can think of things like that. What is it on this planet that needs doing now that I know something about and that probably won't happen unless I take responsibility for it? And that can be something in your community or in your family or, in any organization that you belong to. But it doesn't have to be something grandiose or anything like that. But there are things like that nobody's going to do them unless you do. And that can give you an awful lot of satisfaction. So I think repurposing is a very, very, very healthy mindset to have. How do I want to repurpose myself for the rest of my life? And that may change as you go through these different stages of retirement. But how do I want to repurpose myself, for the rest of my life? What a gift you've been given, to retire and to be able to think about things like that. What a gift.
Hey guys, can I hijack this to give two examples real quick before you leave this slide?
Yep.
Just because they're fun. Because I think in my own house, like my parents have both been working their whole life. They're both planning to retire at the same time. They're already scared of what that looks like. Just being with each other 100% of the time, 7 days a week, right? Like right now they got the weekends, they got evenings, I think the prospect of 100% always together, like, man, we definitely need to figure out something else to do. The other side of that, though, when my spouse is, her dad actually worked her whole life, but her mom was a stay-at-home mom. And the first day she had like her normal cleaning day, like say Monday's cleaning day. They're both now he's retired. So of course good husband, volunteers to help cleaning. She's going around doing the normal routine. He starts like moving the couches and pulling the refrigerator out. And she almost knocks him upside the head saying, I don't do that every single week when I clean, right? That's like a once every 6 months or once a year type of thing to go underneath the couch. So just have patience with each other as you make this transition to the only thing I can tell you there.
Yeah, I actually had a client that was a doctor, came to me after the fact that he was retired. He was working. We had done a financial plan for him. We thought he had 5 to 7 more years to retirement. He just decided one day, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm out. He knew he could afford to do so because we'd already done the plan. He was out. Didn't talk to me, didn't talk to his spouse, just said, I'm done. Told us after the fact. Now, I mean, he didn't like just quit and retire the next day. I mean, he's like, gave us like 2-week notice, like, hey, I'm out, I'm retiring. Didn't consult his spouse at all. He's sitting around the house all day, getting in his wife's way, who has her routines. Wasn't the best situation for either one of them because they weren't prepared for it. They hadn't discussed it. What happens? About 4 or 5 months later, guess who's back at work? And he's much happier. And they were both happier because they had prepared for it emotionally. There wasn't good communication around that.
One other thing I'd like to add too is I think it's important to give yourself some time and space to think about these things clearly and not be, kind of in the middle of everything when you do it. And not everybody has the opportunity to do that, but we can probably all take some time to do that, just to clear our minds and really evaluate and think about what's important to us. And my wife and I recently had that opportunity. Last October, we went to Spain and we went on a walk called the Camino de Santiago. And we actually walked from the last village in France before you cross the Pyrenees to all the way across the northern part of Spain to Santiago de Compostela. And it was a 500-mile walk, and it took us about 34 days. And I know it sounds really crazy, but we had the most wonderful time we've ever had together, I think. It was just an amazing, amazing, amazing experience. But the one of the big takeaways from it is that when you first start walking, you're totally consumed about, okay, do I have the right gear, and what's the weather going to be like, and do we know what the route is, and are we going to get lost, and all these kinds of things. And you kind of process all of that, and then you think about, okay, what did I leave behind at work, and what are the kids doing, and blah 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 blah, and what are we going to do when we get home? We've got to catch up on this and that and the other thing. And you think about all that kind of stuff, and you talk and you talk and you talk, but you're still out there, and you've got another 6 hours to go that day. And you finally get to the point where everything kind of gets real quiet, and you just have a chance to start thinking. And I remember 2 things that happened there. One night we were having dinner together, and I said, Deb, I made a decision today. And she goes, uh-oh, what now? And I said, I'm not going to work Friday afternoons anymore. And she goes, what? And I said, I'm not working Friday afternoons anymore. I've been doing it all my life. I'm just not going to do it anymore, period. And she was just kind of shocked. And so that was, you kind of get into that, that deeper thinking, and that's kind of a small amount. Another thing is you really start thinking about what's important in life. And one night, once again at dinner, after walking all day, I said, Deb, if you could choose any one word that would describe what you were thinking or feeling today, what would it be? And she just looked up at me immediately and she said, gratitude. And I said, oh my gosh, I chose the same word, the same exact word. And you're just out there and you're just thinking, and the cobwebs are being cleared, and you just think about, I'm so doggone lucky. I've got so much to be to be grateful for and to be thankful for. And that's a really, really healthy attitude. It's a really, really good place to start when you start thinking about your retirement. Gosh, if you're ready to retire and you can see your way to it, there's so much to be thankful for, so much to be grateful for. And that's just a really healthy place to start when you start, planning your retirement and figuring out what you want the rest of your life to look like.
Thanks for that, guys. And so when we're thinking about retirement mindset, it's important to understand the difference between a change and a transition. A change is an event that is situational and external to us. A lot of times we don't have control over this. Think things like marriage, death of a loved one, divorce, illness, retirement. But what we do have control over is the transition. Transition is the internal process of adapting to that change, right? This is going to be many phases. We talked about those 6 different emotions that people go through as they get retired. And it's a non-linear process. There's going to be like a roller coaster. There's going to be highs and lows. But with a transition, The key here is two things. One, focus on what you can control. You can't control the change that's happened, but you can control how you respond to that. Do you choose to be optimistic and positive, or do you choose to be negative? I think Pat said that great. Have an attitude of gratitude. So we talk about shifting your mindset in retirement. First, retirement, you got to view it as a lifestyle, right? So retirement is not about just sitting on the couch doing nothing. It's about finding what your passions are, pursuing them, and being intentional in what you're doing. Be deliberate. And again, in retirement as a mindset, you can choose to be positive or negative, like with anything in life. Hopefully you guys choose positivity. Anything you want to add here, Pat?
No, I don't have anything to add to this one.
So let's talk about just some practical things that we can do to prepare for retirement. The first thing is retooling your purpose, right? When you talk about retirement, it's not the end of your life. It's not the end of a chapter. It's the start of a new book, start of a new chapter, in the same book. When an old door closes, a new one opens, right? So it's about create success. How do you create a cycle of success? Well, remember, success breeds success. So if you start by setting smaller goals and eventually let those lead to larger goals, that kind of helps you snowball into retirement in a good way. Example here, like we said, you got a lot of time to fill when you're retired. Choose how to fill that time appropriately. You're not going to have as much social interaction because you're no longer working. So maybe create goals of calling one friend or family member a day and go out to lunch or dinner with a friend or family member once per week. After you've been doing that for a few months, maybe try and make 2 calls a day, maybe try to go out twice a week. But as you're doing that, you're being intentional, you're able to continue to work towards filling your time in a way that's going to bring you happiness. It's not about wasting time, it's about finding enjoyment in the time that you have. The easiest way to know how to set those goals is to follow your passions. What is it that you're good at? What is it that you're passionate about? That's going to allow you to, if you focus on those things and build your goals around those things, that's going to bring you the most happiness. I had one client, they're a couple, they both lived in San Francisco, they were executives. They worked very hard their entire lives, never chose to never have kids, never had a pet. When retirement came, they chose to get a dog to kind of fill that time a little bit, give them something to kind of care for. So they got their dog. That led to them starting to do dog shows. They found success in that. That led to them buying a trailer and a motorhome to travel the country to do more dog shows. That led to them becoming one of the top 3 breeders for their dog in the entire US. So you never know what your passions are going to be. So it's okay if you got this like wild hair or this random thought and you're like, where did that come from? Lean into it, see what that might lead to. The analogy I like to use here with the create, follow, and enjoy is surfing, right? When you surf, there's a lot of work you have to do to get out there. You have to swim out there to get position. You've got to identify and wait for that wave. When the wave comes, you've got to paddle, get yourself in position. You got to get it up on the board. But once you've done all that work, man, that ride is just amazing. And so when you're on that ride, when you're enjoying that wave, enjoy it. Remember, this is the pursuit of happiness is really what retirement allows you to do. Sounds kind of corny, I know, but if you lean into this, I promise you, you're going to find a lot of enjoyment. Pat, anything you'd like to add here?
There's 2 things that I'd like to mention that kind of pertain to this, I think, and one of them is about purpose. I believe that each one of us was created for a reason, and there's a purpose to our lives, and sometimes it's hard to identify what that is. Sometimes we know, sometimes we feel like we know, sometimes we'll never know. But I had an opportunity to visit Mother Teresa in Calcutta about 1.5 years before she passed away, and spend some time with her there. And I remember one day we were sitting on a bench together, just the 2 of us, and we were talking, and I was kind of overwhelmed by the situation, to be honest with you. Just like, what the heck am I doing here? Why am I here? and kind of started freaking out a little bit, like, oh my gosh, and she just kind of, I finally turned to her and I said, Mother, I said, I can't do what you do. I just can't do what you do. And she just took my hands in hers and she looked me in the eye and she says, Pat, she says, you know what? She said, I can't do what I do with people like you. And what that said to me is that what she's trying to tell me was that, we're all here for a reason. We've all got a reason for being here. We're all created with a purpose in mind. And we may think that during our working career, that's when that manifests itself. But boy, not necessarily at all. You've got maybe a quarter to a third of your life left, and you may just now entering the season where the reason for your being is identified and becomes apparent, and you make that difference that you were created to make. So look at this retirement as an opportunity, as a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful opportunity that with a little bit of work and a little bit of effort on your part can be just totally fulfilling and satisfying. And maybe this is the season where you realize what it is that you're here to realize, or your purpose in life. And we won't know that until we get through it and it's all over. But there's a real good chance it's coming up and not behind you. So, I would just encourage you to keep that in mind. The other thing is that, Clint Eastwood turned 91 or 93 or something like that a couple of weeks ago, and he's producing a new movie. And somebody said, Clint, what are you doing? When are you going to give it up? How do you do this kind of stuff at your age? And he said, I never let the old man in. I never let the old man in. And it's just a mindset that he has. He just, I'm not old. I'm never going to be old. I'm never going to let the old man in. So attitude, gratitude, those things are really, really important. Purpose, those things are really, really important.
Absolutely. And that was a great segue to our last slide here. Keys to success in retirement. It's not about sitting around, it's about pushing. And the number one thing there is having a sense of purpose. Okay. And with that sense of purpose, that's going to help you to use your time to work, help others, go to events, and participate in activities. Those that are most successful in retirement, and success is simply defined as happiness, finding enjoyment, fulfillment. Socializing is the S. Spending time with friends and others. Practice healthy behaviors. Make sure that you're mentally being healthy. Take care of yourself there. Make sure that you're physically staying healthy. Express gratitude. I know that we've been beating that drum a lot this thing, but that leads, we have a proper mindset that just shapes everything positively. And the last one is focus on your strengths and abilities. Okay. I had a client that was a CFO for a very large company, retired. His wife was very active in volunteering, very active, probably spent more than 20 hours a week volunteering her time and her services. He didn't volunteer so much. That wasn't his thing. And that was okay. But talking with his wife, who was doing so much volunteering, what he learned is a lot of those organizations needed help running their books. They were burning money, wasting money because they didn't know how to manage their money effectively. He stepped in and he ended up being the CFO of three different charities, helped them to be more efficient running their business, their organization, so they could maximize, what they were trying to accomplish. So he took his talents and his strengths, continued to do them in retirement to help others help others. Pat, anything you want to add here?
No, I think you said it well, Paul. Thanks.
All right, just some excellent resources for you guys to look at if you want to continue kind of what we talked about today. A great one is Silver Sneakers. If you want to be active physically, they're a fantastic resource to use to get active in retirement. If you want to learn more and just be better prepared, especially financially, maybe build some better financial literacy, It's Your Money and Estate is a local organization here in Orange County, and they have a website, itsyourmoneyandestate.org, free resources, and their whole focus is providing financial literacy for seniors. So some great resources there. Maybe you want to volunteer or get more active, but you don't know where to start. great place is volunteermatch.org. You can go there, do a little survey, look at their resources. They can get you plugged into a local charity organization that's going to be following the same things that's important to you. Last one, if you just want some more resources in general, check out our website, BFSG University. We have a lot of great videos, blog posts, short videos, webinars that you can watch on a variety of different topics.
Paul,
With that-
that Silver Sneakers program is just an amazing, amazing, amazing deal. I think you're eligible when you turn 65, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and what that means is that at age 65, you can basically sign up to work out at whatever gym you want to work out at. They almost are all members of the Silver Sneakers program. It's a Medicare program, I believe. And LA Fitness, 24-hour Fitness, all of those gyms, you just go and say, hey, I'm 65 years old, sign me up, and you work out there for free. And it's just an amazing benefit, really, that we've of course paid for over our lives, but it's an amazing benefit.
Chad, I think that's it for now.
That's it. Yeah, advance this thing, Paul. Thank you, Pat and Paul, for all of your comments today. Awesome presentation. For the resources to see on the screen, I actually did post them in the chat box for all of you as well. My understanding, I don't think Zoom actually lets you copy and paste out of the chat box. So maybe open them up in your browser on like a separate monitor. Otherwise, we will include all of the resources in the email that goes out with the replay link to today's presentation, including a copy of the slide deck. If you would like a copy of the slides, will come out from our team to everybody on the line today, hopefully sometime tomorrow. With that, let me get to, even before the questions, I think there's just a couple fun comments from some of the attendees giving some ideas to everybody. One of them out there is, maybe not everybody can do it, but if your employer would allow you, and if your spouse works, allow both of you to take a sabbatical, right? During the last few years of your working years, maybe you take a sabbatical for a few months or a year, right? Whatever your employer would allow, maybe even just a few weeks, right? Call it it needs to be an extended vacation. You can actually see how well you mesh when you're just together, I think is what this person's getting is how well is it going to be with each other 100% of the time when it's not just a vacation. I think everybody loves vacation, but if this is like the forever vacation, and how do you test that out? I think with a really, really good comment from one of our attendees today.
That's a great idea.
The next one I have here too is another person said, I'm going to retire at 75, already 71. We're changing that age curve. We have to go back to that slide in a second anyways. Said, what about cooking school, right? They're going to go back and learn how to cook. Maybe they already know how to cook, but become even better, right? Just some fun ideas, right? I think the idea here is get creative. LA Gym Fitness, is it free for, did you guys know, is it free for retirees? That's just a cool comment. But just find ideas, I think is the gist here. I think, even like Pat, advice on if your employer would allow you, try to scale out, right? Going from, 40 to 60 hours a week to 0, can be remarkably difficult, right? I think my dad's struggling with that just right now too, is what do you do? Like is not ready to retire. If your employer allows, again, not every employer allows it, not every job function allows it, but could you move that down to 30 for a year, then 20 for a year? And maybe even 10 for a year, and maybe you do consulting for a year that you kind of work as needed. Not every employer allows it, but if you can do that, would be an easy way to figure out how you're going to fill that time, but still be engaged for a couple of years toward the end.
Yeah, it's a great way to make a smoother transition for a lot of clients. Is kind of either going part-time if you're able to, or maybe doing some sort of side business and kind of leaning into that. I've had several clients start businesses. I have a client that she did quilting and she was great at it. And she started selling her quilts and giving away her quilts, donating them. And she actually had a great profit doing that. We have another client that's great at sewing. She started a YouTube channel just for fun, just something to do. And she's actually bringing in great revenue. She has 100,000 views for every video that she does on how to sew.
So guys, and let me get to some of these questions because we do have some questions in the queue here. And again, for everybody, there's still a Q&A box. We'll stay on the line for as long as questions come in. I think we don't actually have, we always plan these. I think there's even somebody in one of our surveys from last week that said it would be great to keep these to an hour. And that is always our intent. Our goal is to, at the top of the hour, we are done. We've answered at least a few questions. But of course, our team wants to be here with a remarkably engaged audience. And if there's still questions in the Q&A box, our goal is to stay here and answer as many of them as possible until we eventually need to get back to other client meetings and things that we need to do as well. So I think today the goal was to be done in 45 minutes to 60 minutes, and hopefully we achieved that. So hopefully we can get to as many questions as possible. Otherwise, we do understand a lot of you might have to drop at the top of the hour, but we will continue and answer questions if they're here. Paul, can you move this thing back? The first question I have here goes back to slide 10. You really, and let me try to explain it a little bit different from how we did it the first time here. Because it shows age 65, but I think the comment here is most people will be retiring at the age of 67. What's important here is to understand what's going on the slide here is, like, I understand the comment that most people will need to retire at age 67, or even from a Social Security perspective that recognizes full retirement age is now age 67 for a lot of people. What is on this page right now is expectations of current workers versus current retirees. Current workers, right, or people that are expect to retire at the age of 65. Right? A lot of them, I understand, think they're going to have to make it to age 67, but in a survey done by the Employee Benefits Research Institute in the source at the bottom, current workers expect to retire at age 65. What this is showing is the reality. People actually retiring as of 2021 retired at age 62 instead. And it's kind of saying, well, while people expect to work until age 65, and maybe that's becoming age 67, you might not actually make it, right? And then pull up the next bar chart too, Paul. The point of that is the biggest reasons for that at the very top in gray are health problems and disability in companies downsizing and closing, right? And why that's so important is hopefully because you're all on these webinars, you watch all of them, hopefully you're saving for retirement, doing a really good job, if not already in retirement. Hopefully you're the purple bars, right on the bottom of the right side, and you're able to afford retirement and you want to do something else. But the gray bars can be a difficult one, right? It meant you didn't choose to retire on your own terms, which I think kind of might change that dynamic, right? How's that transition? And maybe Pat or Paul, you have clients that have had to experience this. We do have a question about this too. It's one thing when you choose to retire, and maybe that's that 6 to 9 months transition. You're going to go through all these emotional stages, those 6 stages you mentioned. How might that change if you're forced into retirement?
It's a tough one. If you're forced into retirement, now there's psychologically more hurdles to clear. So it can be tough. I've had client had a stroke, was forced into retirement, not able to work anymore. A lot of different situations. If you're forced into retirement early for whatever the reason, it's a struggle. It can be a real struggle. And we talk about positivity, just be positive. That's great. And then we want you to get there. But you have to walk through some stuff. If you've got a lot of things going on and things didn't work out the way you wanted to, and you didn't get to leave on your terms, that's a tough pill to swallow. There are people out there that specialize in helping people with this transition. There's people out there that offer therapy or counseling, and that's okay. If you need help, don't try and do this on your own. If you need other resources, talk to a financial planner, talk to a therapist, talk to a counselor, talk to whatever it is that you need that's going to help you get right. If you're religious, talk to your minister, pastor, religious leader, whatever that is. But lean into others and let others help you, and don't try and do this alone. Hopefully that didn't get too dark.
I hope not. I don't think so. The next question I have for you, and this is not exactly along the exact same line, but kind of similar. It does move into healthcare though. And this person says, do most people that retire seek, more medical insurance or take a chance and not be covered at all? Right? Especially when you think about some of these statistics we're talking about right now, maybe forced into retirement, maybe like for any of these reasons, they might not qualify for Medicare yet. What do you guys see some of those clients that can't get Medicare coverage yet but are forced into retirement before they really qualify for it?
So there is a financial aspect to this question, of course. But if you're forced into retirement early, so just to make this clear, and there's a great webinar 2 weeks ago on Social Security and Medicare, And if you want to get more details on that, I would recommend, give us a call. We can talk with you about that. But with Medicare at age 65, you can go on that. I've actually had employees that are clients that were employees still working that switched from their employer benefits to Medicare because Medicare was actually, in fact, cheaper for them. So if you reach age 65 and you still plan on working and you're forced into retirement, oh, that stinks. But from a cost perspective, you're probably going to save money, or at the very least, be very close to what you're paying already. Medicare is actually much more affordable than the average health insurance policy for most individuals. If you're before age 65, the great thing is we have the healthcare exchanges on each state now. And here in California, there's actually wonderful benefits. If you are lower income, if you're a married couple making, I think it's less than 80 to 90,000, most of, if not all of the health insurance costs will actually be covered by the state. So there's the healthcare exchanges to lean into. If you have questions about that or how to do that, give me a call. Happy to talk more about that.
So next one I have here, I'm going to do another fun comment first because I have somebody I think Pat said, and we had it in our flyer actually, like, don't think retire, think repurpose. I worded another way. One of our, attendees here, said that their advisor said something similar, retire to something, not to nothing. I think it's very true, right? Just figure out ahead of time, like, what are you going to do, right? It's your life. This is, again, a quarter of a third of your life you're going to live in what we call retirement. But why do we call it retirement? It could be anything, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because retirement originally, when Social Security first started, was the average retirement length was about 8 to 12 years. Today, it's more than double that. The average retirement is 25 to 30 years. That's a long time to be doing nothing. That's why we're telling you to do something.
Paul, when Social Security was first enacted, and I might get this a year or so off, but when it was first enacted, you were allowed to obtain a benefit when you turned age 65, but the average lifespan of a man at that point was 63. So, a little different situation. You kind of, worked until you were 65, and you're lucky if you lived a couple more years. And that's just not the case anymore. It's changed dramatically. But yeah, when Social Security first came out, they weren't planning on paying out a whole lot of benefits, I guess, because you couldn't collect until you were 65, and the average life expectancy was 63.
So the next one, Paul, can you go to the next slide? I think it'd be good to leave it up while I ask the next question. I'm sorry, slide 11. There you go. And as a reminder for especially for anybody that was looking to see this slide again, I will share a link to the replay, so you can always watch this. It'll actually come out in 2 emails, one from Zoom and one from our team tomorrow. We'll also have a link to all of the links in the chat box will be included there as well. We will also have a link to a PDF copy of the slide deck that these two used today. So again, any of the content you want to revisit, you'll have a number of ways to access it in both soft copy and video format tomorrow. The next question I have here, gentlemen, is there a list or anything, guys, you can share for that pre-planning stage you talked about right now, getting to somebody that is able to plan for their retirement date? Like, what is the list of things they should be looking at or thinking of?
That's an excellent question. And we pretty much led off with that with the questions that we asked. So the first place that I would start from a emotional perspective would be to start asking yourself those questions, answering those questions, and really kind of digging deeper on that. On the financial side, talk with a financial planner. If you have one, great. If you don't, feel free to reach out to us and we can point you in the right direction. Answer some of your questions.
Yeah, I think the list is revisit basically the entire presentation, right? Is like that was really the point. I think this was a brand new deck. We've never done this one before. They came about just from a lot of people are struggling with this, right? And a lot of our clients getting into retirement. It's such I think a topic that people forget about, right? They're so focused on work and life and children and grandchildren, and everybody thinks that they want to retire until they get there. And now it's like, oh, wait, what do I do? What do I do? And maybe you want to sit on the couch for 12 hours. And if that's the case, then that's a great retirement for you. But for a lot of people, they don't want to. I think the other thing I think some of us forget about too, and just with talking with clients, is everybody thinks they're going to travel and golf and do all these fun things for their entire retirement. But at the end of the day, your body might not make that possible for your entire retirement, right? So maybe you got to do that for the first 5 or 10 or 15 years. The more active you are, the longer your body's going to last and allow you to do those things. The less active you are, the sooner you're not going to have a choice anymore.
Chad, let me add to that. A while back, I've got a sister that was a breast cancer survivor, and she decided to run in a breast cancer marathon in Jacksonville, Florida, called the Dawn. It's the biggest one in the country for breast cancer. And when I found out that she was going to do it, I called her up and said, "Hey, sis, I'll do it with you." And then a couple of my sons decided they wanted to do it also. And my other sister decided she wanted to do the half marathon. And I called home one day and I go, "Mom, where's Dad?" And she goes, "He's out running." And I go, "What?" And my dad was 80 years old. And I said, "Don't tell me." And she goes, "Yep." And he's going to run the marathon. And I go, "Oh my gosh." My dad ran the marathon, first race he had ever run in his life, 26.2 miles. Ran the marathon, took second in his age group. There are four people over 80 in his age group. And so don't limit yourself. You know, as Chad said, stay active, because the longer you are active, the better the quality of life. And Dad will turn 93 in January, and he still exercises every day. And I'm trying to keep him from starting a new business. And he just, he's just always involved in something. Always.
Well, gentlemen, that was the last question I had here today. So any closing remarks or last tidbits of advice that you might want to give up, Paul? And you need to bring up that disclosure so we don't get in trouble here. But really, Pat, any last bits of advice you might have for the audience today?
Somebody, asked the question, really Silver Sneakers is free? Yeah, it really is. It's just like, it sounds too good to be true. But like, if you're 65 and over, you really can be a member of LA Fitness and 24-hour fitness and all these other places for free. And it's easy. So just go to silversneakers.com and sign up. It's just terrific.
Yeah, again, as a reminder to the group, like, we don't get paid by any of these things. This is truly just meant to be free resources and things that we know our clients use and love. There's not like any referral codes or any of that kind of weird stuff that goes on here.
I would just, the only 2 words I would add are just focus on being intentional, and practice an attitude with gratitude. If you're doing those 2 things, a lot of the other stuff's just going to fall in place.
Great. Thank you, gentlemen. I hope everyone has a great afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you all hopefully next week for our last presentation of the webinar series, The Case for Roth Contributions. Thank you all.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks everyone.